push a button to get,
Okay,
there
there
we
we go.
go.
Okay.
All right, so welcome everybody to Ann Arbor Solar Stories with GLREA. Thank you for being here. This evening, we're going to hear from Richard Dokas, who's an Ann Arbor resident who went solar and then got a battery. And he's going to talk about his solar system and his battery and his decision making. Before I do that, I just want to sort of highlight and mention that the first Thursday of every month it goes back and forth now, I think, between Ann Arbor Solar Stories and Detroit Solar Stories. Every Thursday something's going on, correct, John? I know it's changed a little bit. There's clean energy seminars on Thursday nights and energy Q&As on Thursday nights. So if you register for Thursday night energy seminars, you'll learn about all of them. And then the last thing I want to make sure I do is thank the sponsors of this program, which are EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, and Synergy for helping to sponsor these programs. Did I miss any, John? I hope not. No. Okay, good. All right. So that's all my, initial babbling, and I'm going to turn it over to Richard so that we can hear what we came for. Thanks, Richard.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to talk about is my voyage into solar here in Ann Arbor. What got me started thinking down this road was our many, many, many outages. I've lived here for over 50 years now, and in the last decade, it's gotten to the point where just about everybody up and down the street has a generator. And so when the power goes out, you hear this horrible roar. And I was actually part of that. But the problem, I really ran into lots of problems with the generator system. I think basically the problem is that it's a demand system. And by that I mean, if you don't have power and you're using a generator and you turn on an appliance, especially something that's drawing a fair amount, it's not instantaneous. And in fact, all the lights dim and things groan until the motor speeds up enough to produce the electricity to supply the demand required. And that is a real problem because, of course, a lot of our appliances these days have lots of electronics in them, and it doesn't play very nice with these dips and valleys in the electrical supply. In fact, what finally convinced me that I had enough was when my refrigerator got destroyed, or I should say the electronics in it. And consequently, there I was with a $3,200 bill hanging over my head, and I thought, that's it. And, we've been out of electricity just so often. And I do a lot of woodworking, and I can tell you right now, my generator, which was a fairly good size one, it had a 10-horse motor in it, and it wouldn't turn on any appliance, or I should say any of my equipment that required 220. It just, even though it supplied 220, no, it wouldn't do it. So anyway, I looked into getting a generator, big generator, and one that was operated by natural gas. And the more I looked at that, actually the economy of it didn't make any sense at all, besides the ecological impact on the environment. So that's when I started thinking solar might be the way to go. So my first venture, first of all, I probably should, for purposes of your understanding of my setup here, is just to explain what my home profile is like. So I have a ranch style home. It's 1,500 square feet, so fairly modest. My wife and I are both retirees, and all of our appliances are, I'm talking about our major things like our range and our furnace and our hot water heater and everything. These are all gas, not electric. Okay. So that kind of gives you a little profile of the house itself. I first started off with the obvious things to do, which go to complete LED lighting. And my thermostat is, I don't know if can you see my entire screen? Let me see here. Um,
Yeah, we can see this
Yeah.
the
because some of
slide.
this is,
Yep.
yeah, my picture here. Oh, I see what I can do here. I think. Oh, that didn't do it. How do I get back? Linda? Um, trying to, let's
You
see.
can still see your slide.
Yeah, I can't see them at all. That's the
Oh.
problem. The slides absolutely disappeared. Where'd they go? Oh, there they are. That's right, obviously. Okay, there we go. All right, now I can see the screen too. Before it was covered. Okay, so my thermostat settings are, as you see here, I've included ceiling fans, which turned out to be a wondrous idea. Really helped. I've got a lot of shades and window coverings to keep out the cold, and I have a rather well insulated house. So, and you can see my initial system here was designed for 6.4 kilowatts. And here you see the 16 panels on my unattached garage and with the inverter inside the garage. Okay. And so on my deck, which is where my electric meter was uh, located, that's where all the other equipment needs to be housed. And so there you can see obviously the meter. And then I my original 16 panels are controlled by this. This is the shut off. And I have recently added 4 additional ones facing east. My 16 panels are facing west. So my situation in terms of uh, the solar panels location are not the ideal, but it works. This is the controller here. It's a Tesla controller, and that determines where the electricity is coming from and where it's going. And it's connected to the internet. So if I have a power outage, it immediately sends a message off to DTE saying, hey, and it gives my address and says, I don't have electricity. So I don't have to call them up and tell them. The controller also supplies when we have a incoming storm, um, and if the National Weather Bureau, announces it, that becomes an open gate, and basically it will, while the grid is still intact, it will start dumping electricity into my batteries, topping them off to get me through an outage, which is kind of interesting. This also sends messages to my phone app, which tells me when outages have occurred. Okay. Then I do have 2 power walls. I started off with one, and then I decided that wasn't enough. And I'll go into how I made these decisions as we go along. Here is a picture of one of them in my basement. And for size comparison, you can see there's the dryer next to it. So it's about the height of a dryer. It's about 4 inches deep. These Tesla, I was very apprehensive to begin with putting one in my house because I've heard of these cars, taking off uncontrollably. But it turns out that the chemistry of these power walls is different than the ones that are found in cars. The car batteries are lithium cobalt batteries, which are a little bit less stable than these, which are lithium phosphate batteries. And apparently none of them have ever caught on fire. And so, and they're UL listed, and apparently they've tried to get them to go on fire and haven't been successful doing that. They have uh, a built-in cooling system and heating system actually inside here. So there's a fan off to the side. And there's tubing that runs through this and basically keeps the internal environment at steady state. Okay, and there are two of those. Okay, so the first thing I want to go through is how I made my decisions. And the first one picture here is a bill that goes back to April of 2022. Okay, now I'm going to use the same time period for each of these presentations because I want to be able to compare apples to apples. And so I chose April as the month simply because that was the month that I began by putting in the solar panels. So you'll see a comparison of before and after and so on as we go along. The important thing here to pay attention to is the kilowatt usage, okay? And down here in your bill, it'll tell you what your daily average is. So before I put in, before solar panels were part of my picture, I was using in April 16.8 kilowatts just around the house per day, okay? Now let's then go to the next time period, which was just after I put in the solar panels. Okay. And so, hold on just a second, Linda. It's very distracting. I'm getting all these pictures, please. So over here, you'll see that once I put in the solar panels, it dropped my usage again in the same month, but 1 year later, down to 9.5. So that kind of give you an idea of the value of having the solar panels. And then after putting in the batteries, and this really surprised me, but it shouldn't have when you think about it, because obviously when it's dark, you're not producing electricity, you're pulling it in from the grid. Now, instead of over 16 kilowatts per day, now I'm down to 0.5. So it's a dramatic decrease in the usage for the same month, same time period, same spread of days, 2 years later. Okay, and so that was uh, pretty impressive, I thought. Now, one thing before we leave these bills, I might point out to you, if you've ever studied your bills, and I've spent a fair amount of time figuring out how they arrived at all these numbers, but one thing you really want to pay attention to is in terms of the cost structure, we tend to think of the rate that we pay per kilowatt. But that's only part of the story. In fact, a minor part of the story, as it turns out. So if you take a look at this bill here, for example, this was this year in the month of April. On-peak charge was 5 cents, and my off-peak charge was 6 cents. And I gave to the grid 36 dollars worth of electricity on peak and so $40, over $40 of electricity went back to the grid when I'm taking in substantially less. In fact, you add that up, the on peak and off peak, you come up with something like a dollar. Okay. But if you look down here at distribution charges, the actual cost to bring it into you, it starts to make a lot more sense. The whole idea is, in fact, I think it's easier to see if I go back one. Okay, here we go. So here we had $20 to bring in essentially, let's see, that would be about $3 and let's call it $3.50, okay, of electricity. So, and then the distribution charge turns out to be a substantial part of your bill. And so that really got me thinking. As soon as I realized that we're paying a lot for bringing the power to us, and that means then the only way in the world of lowering your charge, if that's interesting to you, is to not bring in electricity. And that's what got me starting to think about batteries, backup systems. Okay, so here's an overall view that might help you see this clear. Okay, so in blue here, you've got no battery. In yellow, you've got solar only, and then in green, the battery and the solar. So if we take a look at before, this is each of these are in April, okay, to keep a direct comparison. You'll see, obviously, I was bringing in about 500 kilowatts of electricity. Once I added the solar, that dropped that to 300. And then with the battery backup, down to 3.7. So, and this becomes obvious when you think about it. If you are storing it during the day and at night you're using what you've stored, that will substantially lower the amount of electricity that you have to pull from the grid, as you can see, from 500 to 3.7. And these numbers here for the outflow, that also becomes an eye opener. You can see after just with the solar only, I'm still pumping back to the grid large amounts of electricity. But if you can store it, then it drops substantially. In a later chart that I'll show you, I have an updated chart that will show you this further, bringing it up to date. And you'll see that these numbers here, instead of in the hundreds, in the 600-700 or range, I'm sorry, 3 to 600 kilowatt range, it's way down into around 100 because I'm instead of sending it back to the grid, I am putting it in the battery to use at night, and that's the important thing. Okay, so when you take a look at the reduction, to put a number on it, just having the solar alone reduced the grid usage 43%. When I added the battery backup, now this is battery plus solar. Now you've reduced the usage down 97%. So going from 16.8 to 9.5 to 0.5. Okay. Now I've already alluded to this before about the distribution costs. So these costs you don't hear about and you don't really realize it unless you're really paying attention to your bill, because that's the only way you're going to find out that that's where a lot of the action and increase in your bill is coming from. So it turns out I went back, I keep records if you haven't figured that out. And in fact, I've got 50 years of my electric bills that I've stored away to look and see how things are going. But if you go back to just a recent history of January of 17, that's what the distribution cost was. That's the multiplier, 0.039. And then in August of that year, they almost doubled it, not quite, but 0.69. So a 78% increase. Then in January of this year, the very first bill you got, the distribution cost went up another 18.3%. But that's only part of the story. That's also the same bill, and it's continued till now, where they now started charging you a different rate for the distribution according to time of day. Up to then, it was a flat rate. And so now you're not only being charged time of day for the incoming electricity, but also different rates for the distribution costs. And remember, the distribution cost is substantial. So that really increased the bill considerably when they did that. And let's go to the next slide. Now, what I'm going to be showing you here These pictures are coming straight from my cell phone. This is from the Tesla app, which is a really remarkably useful app. This is showing you what happens when a storm or outage is about to occur. So when you get a storm coming in, and the National Weather Service sends out an alert for that storm, then that controller opens up the gate and brings in electricity. In this particular example, one of our outages, it brought in 8.8 kilowatts. Now, when it brought it in, where it went was straight into the battery. I have two power walls, so there you see the 2x. So each of the power walls, they don't get filled one at a time, they're filled simultaneously. So that 42% uh, uh, turns out to be 42% of each of the batteries. If I only had one battery, then it would be 84%. And you can see what's going on here. 1.1% was being siphoned off to run the house, while the other 7.7 was going into the power walls. Now, I've seen that the amount of the electricity coming in varies. It's not always the same amount. I've seen it as high as 11 kilowatts coming in at one time. That's a lot of electricity. Okay, and the charge is determined by Tesla. So when it stops, it's not filling these up to the brim. It's just filling them up to whatever they do. I don't know how they come up with when to shut it off, but it usually is enough to get you through at least the next day. And then, of course, the next day means hopefully the sun comes out, assuming you're not in this particular part of the year. Anyway, the next slide shows you what a grid outage looks like. Whoops, I'm sorry. So in a grid outage, this is what will show up on the app. So here you see a cut in the power from the grid. The Powerwall now supplies the entire needs of the house. Incidentally, at night, this is pretty much a standard amount that my home needs to run on, about a half a kilowatt. In other words, 500 watts. That runs I've got a deep freeze, a big chest deep freeze, and a large refrigerator, and what lights I might have on. Okay. Now, one nice feature about having a battery backup, of course, is that even during an outage, now you get to use your solar panels. If you don't have a battery backup and you do have just solar panels, your solar panels collection is shut off at the inverter. So the inverter shuts off, and you can't use any of the power coming from your solar panels. And the reason for that, of course, is protection for anybody, a lineman working on trying to reconnect the electricity. So that controller that I have, if you just have panels, you're not going to have that controller. So that's what would shut off and isolate the house from the grid. And so that's the problem with not having a battery backup is you can have a really bright sunny day and there's your solar panels just sitting there idle. So that's one nice thing about having a battery backup. Okay, this is whoops, boy, I'll tell you, this is touchy. So this shows you a further an up-to-date picture of what's going on in terms of my system. So this takes a little studying. Remember, I talked about the daily average. So there's the daily average. This was the daily average starting here where I had installed the solar panels. Okay, so so these numbers here, okay, are still my daily averages, and you can see the sequence of the seasons as they pass along. Incidentally, if you don't have panels, it turns out that May is by far the biggest month for solar collection in our area. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck is the month of May. That month is, it's not, well, that month we have a lot of clear days and your air conditioner is not on and probably your dehumidifier is not on. Incidentally, the dehumidifier turns out to be one of your bigger uses of electricity, and it's on all the time, during the wet period. That was one of the things that I real quickly changed. My dehumidifier ran on about 750 watts. That's a lot of electricity. And I replaced it with one that uses around 325 watts. It actually turned out to work even better. And so um, that whoops, that turned out to be an important uh, uh, thing in terms of my home usage. Unfortunately, my plug came out. Hold on. All right, back in power. Um, so let's see. So back to these numbers now. If you pay attention to the outflow of electricity here, you can see these rather large numbers. I started talking about them earlier. Okay. This is with solar panels alone. I mean, these are really big amounts, large numbers of electricity going back to the grid. Okay, as soon as I went to the battery, check this out. Look at what's happened now. Now, instead of hundreds, we're looking at much smaller numbers here. Okay. And this is that's my last bill. Whoops, gotta be careful not to touch that button. Okay, so as far as the inflow of electricity, you can still see here without a battery backup, so you're still needing a fair amount of electricity during the evening. These numbers are pretty good size. And as soon as you have battery backups, now you've about a third of the amount of electricity is required. Instead of 400, now you're talking, 100, 130, 64. So the battery backup system really, really makes a big difference. And then when you go to your daily usage, you can see that too being impacted because again, you're powering your house at night with the battery. And then with the battery, look at these numbers. Instead of in the mid-teens, now you're looking at the mid single digits. Okay. I did go to a second battery fairly quickly. And the reason why, as soon as I got this battery in, I saw what was happening to my usage. But I was still pumping out, look at the amount of electricity I'm pumping out. And that's money, that's electricity going back to the grid. So I went, nope, I don't have enough battery backup. That's how I decided that I needed another battery. As soon as I saw how much electricity I was giving back to the grid, it just didn't make any sense. So I needed another battery. So, and typically, to be honest with you, what I was finding was that my battery was topping off around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I reached 100%. That meant I couldn't store any more. And so, I wanted not to be able to tap, to tap it completely off. So I do still reach 100%, but now instead of being around 1 o'clock, it's more like 5:30. And that's when I reach 100% in both batteries. And both batteries filled up will last me a couple of days anyway, just with normal usage and not trying to extend it. And that's assuming there's no power coming, or no, I should say, no sun coming in from the sun. So anyway, so this kind of gives you a really good picture of what my system is doing and a good idea of why I went the way I did. Uh, and I did this in steps. Uh, I, I, I thought that the solar panels were going to be the big answer, but it turned out not to be. It turned out that I needed a battery backup. Okay, so bringing this up to date, this is my last bill for this last month. And they did something interesting. I don't know if you peer at your bill, but I do. And what they did was, you probably read about the electric rider 18. This is kind of hard for you to see, so I blew it up here. So what they've done, now this has to do with see, basically what was going on was you really couldn't tap into this this excess generation bank if you had solar panels, because the only time you could was when if you had a month in which you drew more electricity from the grid than you gave. Well, that only happens about 3 times a year. So typically what I was finding was my excess generation bank just kept growing at the rate of $100 per year, or a little bit better than $100 per year. Well, that's, and there was no way in the world of getting it. You would think that you should be able to subtract it from your bill, but you can't. And so what they've done, and to be honest with you, I really still don't completely understand this, and I can't get the DTE to answer my appointed questions about it. But I'll give you an idea of what you're seeing on your bill if you've got a solar panel. So what they've done here is they've broken down um, into summer and winter. This is dealing with the time of day, of course. And this has to do with distribution charges, not cost of electricity. So remember, I told you that there's this multiplier that you multiply to get uh, to see what your credit is. So look at the title. This is outflow generation credits. So this is how they're crediting your account. Now, what they've done, this was up until this last month's bill. This is what the old credit rates were for on-peak summer and winter and off-peak summer and winter. Here they are. And now they've announced new numbers. And they announced them on your bill. You didn't read about this. And these numbers here are substantially lower than those numbers. And here is, I cranked out the percent decline in what they're giving you for your electricity if you only have solar panels. So here's the difference, the amount reduction that they're going to give you for your solar outflow from your system to the grid. Anyway, and I can't come up with, the only number I've ever been able to discover is this one, and that turned out to be the exact number that appeared back 2 years ago as an entry under I think it was the incoming rate. It didn't make any sense. I called DTE and I couldn't get anybody there they knew less than I did when I started questioning them about these numbers. And I'm still chewing on it, trying to figure out where in the world they came up with these numbers. But anyway, what this is a system that allows you, believe it or not, to tap into your excess generation bank. So if I go back to my bill, look, here's my gas bill, $40. Here's my electric bill of $26.45. This thing adds up to an excess generation bank adjustment of 4510. I'm sorry, 4516. So they're reducing the bill by $45, which I've never seen them do that before. So they've actually tapped into the excess generation bank. They've taken $25 out of that to adjust my bill. So it's how they came up with all these numbers is a good question. But anyway, so my total bill ended up being actually a little bit less than what I was being billed for electricity. So they were actually subtracting a little bit of the bill from the gas. So fascinating. Anyway, so that kind of brings you up to date. And I'm looking at the time, and I probably talked too long. So if there's any questions, I could entertain them.
Fantastic, Richard. It might be easiest to take questions if you stop sharing your screen. And then we can see everybody and see if there are questions.
Okay. Let me see. I should get out of the sharing. Is that correct?
And there's like a stop sharing button probably.
Got it. Stop sharing. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. And
Richard, those are some of the that was really, really interesting to see the slides so clearly delineate the increase in distribution charges, the decrease in your kilowatt usage. I thought that was beautifully done.
Linda.
Thank you for compiling all that information and for sharing it with us.
All right.
Yeah, very interesting. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the chat, but are there any, first off, are there any questions or comments for Richard?
How do I get rid of this page?
Yeah, Tom.
Oh,
Get it off my mute.
okay.
Um, two, two-sided things, I guess. One is we may have actually, we got our array in April of 22 as well. And I don't know if we were part of the same solarized group or
Might have been.
not, but Strawberry Solar did ours, and I don't know if that was the same group that did yours. And we have a 9.6 kilowatt external array on the ground behind our barn. We have property out in Lima Township. And so we have put it back behind the barn, and it was a long run to get lines to the house, but we did it that way, and it's worked out very well. But we have waited to look at the changes going on in the storage systems. You know, you have the classic older guy, I think, you know, they've been around a while. But I was interested in whether the we've actually stored a huge amount of, we've got 700 and plus kilowatt hours in our storage bank. And so we've got a lot of stuff to be used. And it's true, this recent billing had the impact of the the state law that was changed. And that has reduced significantly the cost because they started using that banking money for our banking time. But I was curious, maybe Julie could answer it too, is if there's anything going to go on in terms of the Ann Arbor solarized kind of activity for just the implementation of storage systems. I think we are now, you know, at the point where we can be convinced that it would be very convenient for us to do that. I think costs are going down some, but also that we, you know, are ready ourselves to maybe look at that. So I was curious as to whether there's any plan with the solarized program with Ann Arbor that they would do that to add to our system.
Yes, so there's two things. Last winter, I think around this time, Solarize did a battery bulk buy for people who already had solar. Now, we had been running Solarize at that point for, I mean, it's been going on for 5 years. So there were a lot of people who had already gotten solar and didn't yet get a battery because they're, you know, doing it step by step. And so there was a good amount of interest. There was enough to be able to bring a bunch of people together and get a discount on batteries. Batteries are a little trickier because they don't usually have as much markup as solar. So it's harder for the contractors to give a true discount based on volume. They were able to do some, but it wasn't quite as dramatic. That said, are you familiar with, are you, Tom, are you in Ann Arbor or you're not in Ann Arbor?
We're in Lima Township.
Oh, okay, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, because we do have a rebate for the city of Ann Arbor, we have a rebate program and we're rebating solar, not solar storage. But you're not in Ann Arbor, so I shouldn't
Yeah.
promote that to you.
Well, I
Um,
wondered, we saw that announcement, I think, that back,
Mhm.
what, a year ago or some, some months ago.
Last summer we started them, yeah,
Talked about that. And then I never saw any follow-up to it, and I was curious as whether more was going to be done with that. Because
Oh,
it seems to me we're reaching the point where
yeah,
many of us who originally, whether solarized or other, that just added solar, are beginning to be interested in,
Yeah.
seeing the benefits and being interested in adding storage. And
I would recommend this, Tom. Some of the solarized installers that we work with offer the discount on batteries as well as on the solar. And we have had, and some of them don't. We have had people come into solarized groups that already had solar, that just wanted to add on a battery and get the discount with that group. And I know that there is a group, I think, arranging for January. So the best thing that you could do would be to email me or Connor Daly, either of us, and say, I'm interested in joining the next solarized group if the installer is offering discounts on batteries as part of the group.
We're interested.
And we will just put you, make sure that you get that invitation to that bulk buy.
yeah, well, we are interested. And
Okay.
do you recall whether it's Strawberry is one of the
I
groups?
have no idea who it's going to be. I think it's currently being formed, and I think that the host is uh getting multiple estimates to choose their installer. So just drop me an email so that I can make sure that Connor gets it and he's watching for a group that would be appropriate for you. Because if it's not that group, maybe it's the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Dennis, looks like you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for all that information. You have really gotten into it, and that's great. This is the first time I've heard about a controller. And do you need a controller because you got the battery? And if you didn't have a battery, you didn't need the controller. Is that the case? And I understand the batteries are pretty expensive, so I wondered how much more the cost was to get your batteries in there too.
Well, so I didn't get a controller until I got the battery system. I had the solar arrays prior to having a controller. The controller actually was necessary as soon as you go with the battery backup system, because it basically controls where that electricity is going. Think about it this way. The house is using electricity. The solar arrays are producing electricity, but what happens when they produce too much electricity? So now there's got to be some way of sending it to the grid, and there also has to be some way of shutting off the grid in case of an outage to allow your solar panels to still operate. So that's what this controller is doing. It's doing a lot of things, and in fact, also it actually has panels in there for example, that's where my breakers are for my air conditioner. So it does a lot of things. And so if you're going to go with a battery system, the original battery cost me a lot more because it also cost for the controller. The second battery, when I put it in, was like $10,000, and well, actually, it wasn't even that. It was 7,000, because that's everything else was already there. And there's a fair amount of electrical work that has to be done to put that controller in. So the original, if you're putting in a battery system, and the first battery you put in, that's where the cost is, because you're also buying the controller. Yep. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
It looks like there is a question in the chat from Elisa, who says, if there's time, can you tell us how you selected Tesla and or who your installer was.
Okay, my original installer, which I'll leave unnamed for the solar panels, uh, turns out one of the important things, if you're going to do this, you might want to look for somebody that does everything. In other words, you don't have to end up being your general contractor, which is what I had to do. Because the original installer that put in the solar panels, I actually had to act as my general contractor. So I had to get a hold of the people that were going to install the racks to put the panels on, find out when the guys were going to come to put the panels on, find out when the electrician was going to come. But before I could do that, I had to talk to the guys that were going to tell me when they were come to dig the ditch to put the wiring in. I mean, it was a real mess. It took me the whole installation was well over a month. Okay. And when I put in the second array, which I didn't show you, it's a smaller array, it was 1 day. And that's because I went with Oak Electric. And that was another thing. Um, when I, so they even farmed, the original folks even farmed out the electrician. And I was paying attention to the wiring, and I know a little bit about electrical wiring. And I realized that the gauge of the wire that he was going to put in wasn't big enough. And I questioned him about it. He said, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I should be using number 8 wire." Not anyway, and it went on like that. Even the inverter wasn't the correct inverter that they were going to install, and so I don't know. You want to get a hold of somebody that knows what they're doing, and you want to probably get a hold of somebody that's been around for a while. Because think about it for a second. What happens if, because of the political situation, the whole thing dries up and a lot of these folks just disappear on you? So you want somebody that's been around for a very long time and probably won't disappear even in hard times. And that was part of the reason why I went with Oak Electric. They weren't the cheapest. I'll admit that. They were pretty much in the middle of the stream in terms of cost structure, but boy, did they know what they were doing. I mean, I never had you know, uh, anything that came up that looked a little iffy to me. I never found any mistakes. They knew really what they were doing, and they did it, and they did it in 1 day. So, I mean, for example, with the last solar panel, I'm sorry, the last battery that I had installed, the first guy in with these guys was a plumber moving pipes. I mean, really? I didn't have to call a plumber. I mean, he showed up. Anyway,
Thanks, Richard.
But she also asked about how you chose Tesla batteries. Was that because
Oh.
Oak Electric used Tesla?
I looked into that long and hard. I'll tell you. Well, the Tesla had what they're really good at is engineering. Boy, I tell you, it's impressive. That's that. Um, I mean, there wasn't anybody else that even came close to them in terms of the entire system, the software and how the thing worked. When I checked with, that was another thing about Oak Electric. Oak Electric is actually the distributor for all kinds of battery systems. I mean, these guys have put in just about anything you can possibly imagine because they are the distributor. And when in talking to them as to this battery system versus that battery system, there was no question that was the only way to fly. I mean, this system is really, really, really good. And it's, I mean, I've not had one hiccup. I mean, when I can't even tell using, I mean, I'm almost always using my battery backup, and I don't care what I turn on. I never see a fluctuation. I never see a drop. I never see anything, no indication whatsoever that there's anything, strange going on. It's just flawless. And I usually pay attention to a meter that I have just checking. I mean, when I'm using DTE, I see fluctuations in voltage. I don't see any fluctuations with this battery backup. It's just it's just there, and it's just steady state. I can turn on the biggest piece of equipment in my workshop, and nothing. I mean, you can't tell that I turned it on. It just simply is flawless. And remember, I couldn't even begin to turn it on, 220 motor, when with my big generator. It just wouldn't happen. Anyway.
Richard, John Richter is asking in the chat if you'd be willing to share your email address because he would love to see some of your DTE bills. John, you want to introduce yourself so he knows who's asking and why?
Richard, yeah, I'm John Richter. So I'm on the board of directors with the GLREA, and I'm one of our expert witnesses in utility cases. And I'd love to look at your bills and see how they changed when you added the batteries, and then how they changed again, right, with the new law. We see in the MySun network a lot of, yeah, I figured you had them all. We see a lot of confusion about the new law and what exactly happened there. And
Well, I can't get, there is a phone number you can call and talk to these guys,
yeah, don't waste your time.
and they couldn't. I mean, I knew a whole bunch more than they did, but I can't. And I've really spent time trying to figure this. I can't come up with where they're coming up with these numbers. I mean, where are these multipliers coming from? I mean, and they're unannounced. I mean, why did they reduce the amount of? None of that makes sense. It's so opaque.
Yeah. And the process is arcane.
Yes.
If I could just ask one question, what's the kilowatt hour capacity of your solar? I don't think you told us.
Well, the original one, yeah, that was on the very first slide. It was 6.4 kilowatts. Was my original one. Then I added 4 more that are facing east, and those are a little bit more powerful. They put out, I think it's 4.5 kilowatts, something like that, per panel. So, but my usage isn't that great. So that was another thing, getting it to be, even, so to speak, an even flow. And of course, unfortunately, I don't have the ideal setting. I don't have a southern exposure. That would have been really nice. I'm mostly relying upon a western exposure. So
Have a southern exposure, but yeah, I'd love to see your bills if you'd be willing to share an email address and I don't know if you've got.
Extra special, Richard, that you have them because DTE will only give you 13 months of your, if you call DTE and you want to see an old bill to compare it, they'll only give you 13 months of your bills. Which is
I have
really,
a few more than 13 months.
yeah, you do. It looks like Dale.
Well,
Go
the
ahead.
cool thing you can do on the DTE website is you can download your past usage kilowatt hours in every hour of the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So you can actually see how your usage varied from hour to hour. But
Yeah, this electric, the electric meters have really been a boon to DTE, no doubt about it. Because right now they're charging you a different rate for distribution, time of day distribution on your, because of they know how much you're using and they can charge you a different rate for just the distribution, let alone the electric costs. That's, I thought, was amazing that they did that on January of this year.
I don't want to get Dale in because he's been patiently waiting. Go ahead.
On the slide where you calculated the rates, the change over the past year or something like that. I think what you're seeing there you see a decrease in the outflow credit from before till now. I'm pretty sure what you're seeing is the change from summer rates to winter rates. The rates have never gone down from DTE. And they're not likely to. They always go up, but the summer and the winter rates are different. The winter rates are lower. And so I'm
That's
pretty
what
sure that
Monday
you're
is
seeing
all
like,
about. Yeah.
I think what you're seeing is the winter rate is lower. And so that means the outflow rate is also lower.
Mhm.
It just goes along with, it's the same as the power supply rate.
But remember, what I was doing was 1 month, the same month per year. So that was straddling the summer and winter rates.
Yeah, but I'm thinking it must be looking at, just double check again, because I I have a spreadsheet and I put everything in, and my October, the difference between my October bill, they changed the billing periods may change, and so 1 month may not still be, I'm not sure. But in mine, the difference between my October and November bills, the rates, the outflow credit for on peak, and I'm on the same rate as you, the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Mhm.
That outflow credit went down by 16%.
Yes,
The supply for off peak went down 17%. The outflow credit for off peak went down 7%, if I'm calculating correctly. But
that's
that's
true.
just the summer winter thing.
But if you're looking at a very short period of time, I was looking at an entire year. So that averages summer and winter together. I was going from May to May, May to May, May to May. Think about it. That's a whole year in between. So that's not, so that takes into account this, you're doing apples to apples that way. You're taking into account the different rates for summer and winter as a group.
Right. So, but
That's what I was doing.
I'm pretty sure that, well, yeah, the outflow credit, if I go back to like 23,
Mhm.
in summer of 23, the outflow credit was 17 cents, almost even. This
That's
year it was 16.8 cents this summer. It that has gone, that's a little bit because they keep shifting cost onto the distribution part of the,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
So yes, they are going to continue to try to do that, but the whole rate continues to still go up.
Yes.
It's pretty unlikely that they're ever going to decrease the power supply portion of the cost.
Yes. I agree.
But in the distribution, they'll continue to make it more. But anyway, I just want to point out,
Yeah,
I don't think that's quite the right conclusion to, like, it hasn't changed by like 13 or 15% or
I
something.
see what you're saying.
I'm pretty sure. So,
I do want to respect the 8 o'clock hour. I also want to make sure that John Richter, if you want Richard's email address, that you somehow connect with each other, or Richard, I don't know if you want to put it in the chat for everyone, or I can send it along later, although John Richter, I don't think I have your email address to be able to send it, but
Well, why don't you send me John's?
Well, it's in the chat now.
okay, I will, all right, do you see it, Richard?
Yeah,
You want
I
to
do.
grab it before the meeting goes away?
It just disappeared. That was pretty fast.
Oh, no, it's in the chat. Let's see. I will make sure that I put the two of you in touch about that, now that I have John's. So
It's all blurred out on my end.
I got it for you. I'll send it
Okay.
to you.
Okay.
Yep. So again, Richard, thank you so much for that really interesting and very detailed presentation. I think it's going to be really valuable to have this on the recorded for people who want to go back and look at it or want to look at it in the future. It's nice to have these, you know, if people are asking that kind of detailed questions, it's really nice to be able to point them to something in real time that someone's been tracking like you have. So really also appreciate you taking the time to come here and tell your story. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
And thank